fine with dudes jacking off to pictures of her on the internet.
What happened?
Doesn't affect me one way or the other.
For those of you who are out of the loop or wholly unaware, Ian Carter, aka iDubbbz, is a YouTuber who's best known for having an edgy sense of humor and making a series of videos in which he criticizes and effectively ends other YouTubers called Content Cop. iDubbbz has a girlfriend named Anissa Joma, who is best known for consistently behaving in a manner worthy of a content cop. Ian and Anissa have been dating for a few years now and have had the spotlight shone down at them for a handful of controversies in that time, but it seems that their most recent scandal was the most polarizing and impactful of either of their online careers. The internet went into uproar in March of 2020 when Anissa announced the launch of her OnlyFans account. For the non-deplorable humans out there, OnlyFans is an online video and image sharing site where content providers can lock their personal profiles behind a paywall. It is used by people in many industries for many purposes, but is most renowned for its use by women playing life on recruit difficulty. OnlyFans facilitates transactions of any nature but has a reputation as a pornographic media site, with users frequently being paid big bucks for posting nude or lewd images of themselves. Surprise, surprise, iDubbbz fans weren't happy about this. Consensus very quickly shifted towards people labeling Anissa a slut and iDubbbz a cuck or simp. Memes helped propagate this sentiment, and before long it looked like the internet was ready to storm iDubbbz's virtual castle and behead him for committing a crime against the boys. About 3 weeks after Anissa announced her debut on OnlyFans, online discourse showed no signs of slowing down or showing mercy, but iDubbbz finally made a response video. And before we go any further, even though the video doesn't need to be dragged through the mud any harder, it needs to be said that this video is awful. iDubbbz would have struggled to make a worse piece of content responding to the controversy, especially considering the quality of his channel overall. And because I feel strongly enough about what he said in the video, I'm going to cover it. Don't worry, this will all make sense soon. But if you'd like to skip the meat of my argument and get right to why I think iDubbbz is a victim, head to this timestamp.
Tackle two topics that I've recently become very passionate about. That is a section of my audience who thinks they know me, and my opinion on sex work.
The first topic is easily the strongest in the whole video, which doesn't say much.
First of all, I'm not your fucking dad.
Although indelicate, he makes a cogent point here. iDubbbz is a character first and foremost. In his videos, he is playing a role that is so crude and yet charming that he has earned the emotional investment of millions of viewers. What's most important to point out about Ian Carter is, firstly, we don't actually know what he's like as a human. It would make sense that iDubbbz is an expression of some of Ian's deeper feelings and opinions, and that there is significant overlap between the two identities, but that doesn't mean that everything we see on screen is representative of who Ian truly is. Secondly, and most importantly, the fans who were most invested in iDubbbz and subsequently most disappointed when this controversy struck were attached to iDubbbz because they had each developed a parasocial relationship with him. I am by no means an expert on this phenomenon or any facet of psychology, but I think it's plain to see that a lot of the backlash iDubbbz received was because of a perceived breach of trust in his fans' parasocial relationships. Essentially, a parasocial relationship is one in which an audience member feels a strong bond to a celebrity or public figure despite having limited or no direct interaction with them. Humans are social creatures, and so it makes sense that we would seek to have relationships with people we deem valuable or pleasant, especially if we see them on a regular basis. But in the case of parasocial relationships, the person to which we have become attached does not regularly see us and might not even know we exist. It's complicated and can easily turn obsessive. Add this psychological phenomenon to the possibility that Ian is playing an exaggerated, larger-than-life character, and this is his best argument in the video. iDubbbz is not your dad, and you shouldn't look to him as a role model or friend. It's important that I address this point first because it is iDubbbz's only remotely good point throughout the entire response video. For the rest of it, he mostly talks about his opinion on sex work as if any of what he says informs or justifies Anissa's decision.
What am I gonna do? Do you think I should just, take a shotgun to her head? No, bitch. It's time to die now. No, iDubbbz, you should break up with her.
This is a false dichotomy. Killing Anissa and breaking up with her are two drastically different courses of action and are not the only options on the table. iDubbbz, you could talk to her and advise her against starting an OnlyFans.
But I'm cool with it.
We'll come back to that.
You do realize there are guys out there in private right now jacking off to your girlfriend. But I guess it's out of sight, out of mind, it's not a problem.
This is a blatant deflection from the actual problem people have with Anissa's decision. He raises a fair point though. Guys jacking off to pictures of your girlfriend is out of your control. Your girlfriend could take a fully clothed photo of herself on a ski trip and post it to her private Instagram account, and someone out there will find a way to make do with that suggestive eye contact she's flaunting. That's not the point. The point is that Anissa is actively providing explicit images of herself to people in exchange for money.
There's no special pussy. It doesn't become less valuable the more people see it. If that's the case, my body and my person is the most valueless thing on the planet.
Incorrect. iDubbbz has not appeared fully naked and uncensored on the internet, and the male upper body sports no visual sexual organs while the female upper body does.
This isn't done impulsively. Like, what do you think? Someone's just gonna make an OnlyFans just on a whim?
Just because you take your time to decide to snort 10 lines of cocaine and run naked and blindfolded across a highway does not make the decision to do so any better. The example I gave is hyperbolic, but as with Anissa's case, the decision not being impulsive does not reduce how much it impedes your health. But I'll come back to that too.
If you want to morally grandstand, one of the shittiest things that I think you can do morally is judging someone about what they did previously and not hiring them even though they're qualified for the job.
Yes, and there are shitty people in positions of authority throughout the business world.
Like, if you think this affects your standing or your social credibility in getting jobs, you are so sadly mistaken.
On the one hand, he is demonstrably wrong in that people have lost their jobs for having OnlyFans accounts. But on the other hand, he is right, depressingly so. Celebrities like Kim Kardashian and Cardi B have had insanely lucrative and successful careers despite or possibly owed to their indecorous past behavior.
I find it very fascinating that a commentary YouTuber who's known for criticizing others, much like me, would be willing to take the position that sex work is beneath them, that they aren't on the same level as sex work. That's fascinating. I find it really interesting that that's the position you want to take. I think that'll age quite nicely.
This is a long, meandering ramble that says nothing. Commentary is so obviously of a higher standard than sex work. Commentary, ideally, requires that you think and make observations and draw conclusions. Not everybody has the mental capacity to do that. Any part of your body could be used for sex work. All that is necessary for sex work is a body, which automatically makes it the lowest form of service in existence. If the only prerequisite for doing a job is having a body, not even a living one, just a collection of fleshy lumps and holes, then that is the lowest entry standard possible. To not qualify for sex work, you would have to not exist. That's not work. You don't need to put in any effort to allow your body to be used or admired by others. Sure, you could say that sex workers who put in more effort are better at their job, but sex work is such a broad term with such a low bar for entry that there is little incentive and no need for anything besides renting out your body while you lay there like a barely sentient fleshlight. Considering that prostitution is defined as both engaging in sexual activity and being prostituted as opposed to prostituting oneself, all sex work is by definition prostitution. And if you support destigmatizing sex work but simultaneously have something against the use of the term prostitution, then I urge you to wake up and smell the semantics. They're the same thing. Asserting that commentary is not leagues of merit above sex work is dishonest and ignorant of reality.
If your partner is making a lot of money and is very wealthy, that doesn't automatically make you feel fulfilled in the relationship or feel like you're contributing enough.
There were a lot of people criticizing iDubbbz for essentially pimping out Anissa, their argument being that because he is extremely wealthy, she does not need to resort to OnlyFans for more money. And they're absolutely right. There is nothing fulfilling about prostitution. It is satisfying in the short term, if consensual, but in the long term numbs your body to pleasure, reduces your sense of self-worth, and invites a host of mental illnesses and sexually transmitted diseases into your life. Prostitution is so pathetically easy that it attracts the laziest, least driven, least ambitious people imaginable.
Everyone's lost their jobs and people can't pay for anything anymore. I'm losing subscribers on OnlyFans, it's my main source of income. I can't pay my rent anymore. I can't, work and even if I was to go back to work, what am I supposed to do? Go work at a strip club, which they're all closed down as well. They're all closed, all the strip clubs are closed, you can't even be fucking close to somebody because of social distancing. I've got nothing else going for me. I have no other talent. I've got nothing else. I can't dance. I can't sing. I can't do anything. So, I don't understand. What I'm supposed to do. I really just don't know what to do. I just want everything to go back to normal so people can keep subscribing to my OnlyFans.
Take a moment to think about it. Why would someone resort to whoring themselves out for money unless they were desperate? And why would someone be so desperate that they think prostitution is the only option? Either inadequacy or lack of education. And when people, especially children, are so uneducated or brainwashed that they think prostitution is the only option, that is tragic. Those people are victims of circumstance, and I do not apply the same standards of scrutiny to them as I do to educated or average income individuals. Because in the case of people who are obviously well off or educated enough, prostitution is not not the only option, and resorting to it shows both a deep-seated feeling of impotence and a desperate desire for money. Evidently and shockingly, Anissa ticks both these boxes.
Hope and pray that somebody gives me some money because they feel bad for me and they don't want me to end up on the streets sucking dicks.
Listen to that. She honestly doesn't see any job opportunities between titty streaming and prostitution. She genuinely sees no other option. How pathetic do you have to be to believe or even assert that without an online platform and career as an e-thought, your only alternative is being a street whore?
Get out the book of Elaboration, please. Open the text to the Gospel of Future, chapter 1, verse 2. From the streets did she emerge, into the street she will return. And I say unto you, she is for the streets. So be not wary when she must return from whence she came. So now,
that I'm okay with sex workers and girls being slutty. It has no bearing on my life whatsoever. I love my girlfriend, and I'm totally fine with dudes jacking off to pictures of her on the internet. Doesn't affect me one way or the other.
First of all, don't say you love your girlfriend in the same breath as you condone her prostitution. If you want to have a relationship with a woman who you are enabling to sell her body online, then that's within your rights. I wouldn't recommend it, but don't degrade the idea of a real relationship at the same time. Don't pervert the word love to accommodate pimping. Second, it does have a significant bearing on your life, and it does greatly affect you. That is, if you two are actually invested in each other's health. Now, I'm not white knighting for Anissa, saying that I would treat her better or anything. Seriously, I wouldn't. I couldn't respect someone who values their own body and mind so little. But, to my point, prostitution is unhealthy. Once again, whether you want to call it sex work or prostitution is irrelevant. Both terms pertain to engaging in sexual activity, which includes selling lewds or nudes, in exchange for money. Saying sex work instead of prostitution is nothing more than word twisting because it sounds more empowering when work is included in the term even though the act does not require any work. And I know that for some of you, asserting that prostitution is unhealthy is not at all controversial. But not only are there people out there who would disagree with you, there is an entire movement to have prostitution normalized and celebrated. When I say prostitution is unhealthy, I'm addressing the proud sluts and white knights of the world. To be perfectly clear, I'm not taking an ideological position on the subject. I am not arguing that prostitution is wrong. I'm arguing that it is unhealthy and detrimental to society. I am not taking an ideological stance on the matter, but a research-based, logical one. And I will primarily be addressing prostitution with regards to women because they are the victims of sex work at a much higher rate than men. I've already touched on how prostitution is demonstrably for the desperate, uneducated, or brainwashed citizens of the world. If it wasn't obvious that it takes an extremely unstable, vulnerable person to become a prostitute, then it should become obvious that the repercussions of prostitution are nothing but catastrophic. Studies have found that prostitutes become less satisfied with their occupation and lifestyle over time. The terms often used in these studies are dissociation and depersonalization. Dissociation is the disconnect and lack of continuity between thoughts, memories, surroundings, actions, and identity. In other words, it is a detachment from reality and how you understand yourself. Depersonalization means depriving someone or something of human characteristics or individuality. In other words, dehumanization. Dissociation and depersonalization are both strongly correlated to a lack of agency and consent, meaning that some sex workers lose their humanity as a result of not being able to choose whether they work or not. That's not empowering, that's human trafficking. Speaking of which, although many prostitutes, especially those operating online, are selling their bodies by choice, that does not negate the fact that human trafficking and consensual prostitution are inseparable industries. Consensual prostitution could theoretically exist without human trafficking, but human trafficking exists because prostitution is so easy, popular, and profitable. The next time you think about celebrating sex work for how empowering it is, just remember that sex slaves are, by definition, sex workers. Not only is sex work the lowest form of occupation in existence, it does not require consent from those involved. And worse yet, not all victims of human trafficking are adults. Tragically, some children are born into the industry or abducted and forced into it, as a child's brain is underdeveloped to the point that they do not have the capacity to understand what they are being forced to do. Prostitution has severely traumatic effects on them. Children are so impressionable and malleable in their formative years that if prostitution is forced on them, they will likely never shed the attitude of low self-worth and related psychological and emotional distress. Studies have shown that children who grow up in violent environments with delinquent peers who spend their time on the street have an increased likelihood of physical and sexual victimization, which includes prostitution. While studies indicate that substance use is not a strong predictor of prostitution in the future, substance abuse is heavily correlated with past prostitution, which makes sense when you consider the loss of identity and self-worth that comes as a direct result of prostitution. It follows that one might want to use psychoactive substances to fill the hole their loss of identity has left. Prostitution is also heavily related to increased rates of mental illness and STD contraction. Prostitution is associated with being less concerned about using contraceptives, and besides dissociation and depersonalization, prostitutes are more likely to experience depression, suicidal tendencies and thoughts, and substance addiction than the average person, which all fits in with the idea that prostitution reduces your self-worth and desire for self-care. In summary, prostitution is overwhelmingly detrimental to the prostitutes because the occupation greatly increases their risk of contracting STDs, their likelihood to abuse substances, and their rates of mental illness as a result of their lack of agency and humanity. What about this sounds empowering? What about this sounds okay? The argument that they're choosing to be sex workers and thus taking back control of their lives goes out the window when you consider that sex work does not require or incentivize consent because there is money to be made. After all, you don't have to want to do something if you're getting paid for it. Even if prostitutes are not slaves to traffickers, they are slaves to money. You would have to be a mental gymnastics gold medalist to spin the facts to claim that prostitution is even remotely healthy. There is a distinction to be drawn between selling sex for money and selling explicit photos for money. But while they differ in technicality, they are tied to the same fundamental act: reducing a human to a body for someone else's pleasure. There was a time when if I told you that we were living in a dystopian society where barely legal women would sign up to online platforms to monetize their bodies and sex appeal for the pleasure of strangers and people they directly know, and that career choice was being mainstreamed and encouraged, you would think we were living in an episode of Black Mirror. There was a time when we could look at Black Mirror's horrific depictions of potential futures and say, that'll never happen to us. But reality is resembling a Black Mirror dystopia more and more by the day, and the creator of the show has implied as much.
Take the leap. I literally, the day I turned 18, I went to the DMV, I got my ID, I took a picture of my ID, got age verified on Chatterbait, and I started camming.
You think they just coincidentally woke up and was like, wow, today's my 18th birthday. You know what I want to do? I want to become a prostitute online. No, they were groomed into it. They were sold a lie.
What we have here is an extremely harmful lifestyle that is being praised and advertised as fulfilling by a screeching minority of illiterate reprobates who do not see women as anything more than pawns to ease their shame and advance their ideological agenda, which is something about traditional values being constructs of a patriarchy and therefore evil. And maybe they're right, and there is a tyrannical patriarchy dictating our beliefs, but their nightmarish alternate society, full of depressed, suicidal, undignified girls and women, makes the patriarchy seem preferable. So yes, iDubbbz, Anissa's choice does have an impact on your life. Quite a significant one. Her latest career choice means that she is more likely to become depressed and despondent as her sense of self-worth diminishes. If iDubbbz and Anissa's friends and family do not treat Anissa differently based on her decision alone, their opinion of her will certainly change after the emotional rot gets to her. Prostitutes suffer from dehumanization as individuals and as members of society when confronted by people who treat them with as little value as they have treated themselves. There is no silver lining, and their occupation obviously has an effect on the people around them. That's not to say anything about the fact that OnlyFans prostitutes are creating and selling porn. This is a tangent, so I won't dive too deep into it, but porn has its own profoundly harmful effects on people and society. If you are interested in the topic, I highly recommend you go check out Aiden Paladin's videos on the effects of erotica, because she does more research for any given video than I've done over the past year. Her content overall is fantastic, and those two videos in particular illustrate how damaging the OnlyFX trend is from a different perspective. Now, to tackle the sex work issue from another angle, sex sells. YouTube video thumbnails and titles, billboards, ads for every product under the sun. If you want to sell something, using the image of sexually appealing people, often with very revealing garb or no clothing at all, is guaranteed to attract people's attention and associate the product being advertised with the gratification of seeing a sexually attractive human. Advertising is everywhere, and so sex is everywhere. Music videos are easily the worst offenders in glamorizing sex because celebrities who use sex appeal to market their brand are very popular among children and teenagers. Sexually explicit imagery and lyrics are exploitative when aimed at adults, but for children it's downright perverse. It has become normal to tolerate and even celebrate sexual indecency. Adults have the cognitive capacity to decide how to respond to that. Children don't. With them, it's a case of monkey see, monkey do, and OnlyFans is just the most recent proof of this.
They're making videos with their referral links telling girls about how luxurious it is and how much money they make, and then also conveniently not mentioning that they're actually making money off of that referral link, which is technically sex trafficking when your video is not age restricted, by the way.
You used to have to be a supermodel to show off your sex appeal on a large scale, but such beauty standards have only become more accessible and alluring to the average female over time. We've passed the age of the supermodel, past the age of the musical seductress, and most recently past the age of influencers and ethos. Long gone are the days of streetwalkers and cam girls as well. We are now in the age of our friends and family starting OnlyFans accounts to get by until quarantine ends and they can go back to doing real work. Only, do you really think they'll want to go back to menial labor and studying for a degree once they get a taste of the OnlyFans lifestyle? Even if they do actually return to their normal lives afterwards, the mere fact that they had an OnlyFans account will follow them for the rest of their lives. The effects of prostitution are detrimental already. Add to that the familial and social backlash these people will face for having created OnlyFans accounts at all. The stigma against sex work is alive and well, but it has definitely gotten its fair share of dispute recently.
It's his fucking relationship. If he's okay with his girlfriend having an OnlyFans account, all power to him.
On one hand, you have the whole overcoming the stigma over sex work, which I don't think I have a problem with.
A bunch of losers on the internet felt the need to police a woman they don't know, specifically what she does with her body, and really I think what this shows is a pretty flagrant disregard for women's bodily autonomy and reduction of women in our society to not only just bodies on a screen, pieces of meat that we have to be reminded are human beings, but the property of the men in their lives.
I too support sex workers, so yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Women have been censored and controlled for generations and kind of now are moving into a movement where they can exercise and use their sexuality and their body in a way that profits them rather than someone else like a pimp or a strip club owner, you know, usually all men. As a black guy, I'm all about people taking power back from what was previously suppressed for reasons you can probably guess if you picked up a history book.
Because frankly, make your money however you want to make it, fellow humans. Do whatever the fuck you want. Open that OnlyFans, send some feed pics, make that bank, especially now that the world is falling apart and we all need to find a way to make money online.
These people that are acting like their entire life has just come to a complete halt because of iDubbbz supporting his girlfriend's decision.
So long as no one's getting hurt and everyone involved is aware and comfortable with the situation, what is actually the fucking problem with a woman choosing to show off her body for money? The answer, in my opinion, is quite simply that she chose to do so, and the idea of a woman making choices concerning her body that they may not agree with is abhorrent to them.
This should go without saying, but not all stigmas are bad. Just because there is a stigma against sex work does not mean it's something that needs to be combated. As a society, we have stigmas against things like rape and school shootings and nuclear war. Are those also issues of human rights we need to protest, or are they observably destructive acts that warrant contempt? Now look at that handful of examples I found from YouTubers. If the idea that sex work is acceptable is so bog standard that they would treat it with the same gravity as dyeing your hair a different color,
Do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Which I don't think I have a problem with.
What is actually the fucking problem?
All power to him.
then yes, it has been normalized. Prostitution, an extremely pernicious lifestyle, has been made trivial. Sex work advocates will often cite women's rights as a defense for their position, insisting that women's choice is paramount, apparently so important that it supersedes their own well-being. Their argument typically relies on the premise that their philosophy is progressive and therefore more virtuous than what came before, and when confronted with contrary opinions and evidence, they resort to claims of misogyny and patriarchy against their opposition, preaching that any dissidents to their progressive agenda only want to control and restrict women. Meanwhile, they impose their beliefs on public discourse wherever they go, proving who the real tyrants are. No, I don't want to control women. I just don't want to see them end up dopamine-addicted, attention-starved objects. Honestly, I don't think those few YouTubers I referenced are aware of the health side effects of sex work, so I won't claim that they're acting maliciously. But the fact that popular opinion has shifted to the point where undeniably unhealthy behavior is waved away or condoned means that rhetoric like theirs is harmful regardless of their intent. Apathy is not automatically bad, but it isn't automatically good either, and it goes a long way to show how our culture has degraded. I used to believe that there was a fine line between people who are prostitutes because they're lazy and desperate, and people who are prostitutes because they were conditioned to think it's their only option and have never learned anything else. But with media of all sorts shoving sex in our face on a regular basis, that line is becoming increasingly blurry. Whereas sex work was once the occupation for the denizens of the lowest rungs of the societal ladder, it is now seen as a viable lifestyle choice for people who are well off and educated enough that they don't need to resort to it.
Modern prostitution is no longer streetwalking. It is soliciting prostitution to minors and trying to convince them to click your referral link when they turn 18, and while trying to sell them a lie, saying that it's not prostitution, it's just pictures. Well, pictures of what? It's not lowering your value. But you acknowledge photos have value. That's why you sell yours for $5.
With that short preamble out of the way, we can finally get to the real point of the video, which could be summed up as iDubbbz is a victim and Anissa is a skank, but the algorithm would have bared me for titling the video that, so here we are. And I'd like to clarify that when I say iDubbbz is a victim, I don't mean he's innocent. He's a grown man, he has been dating Anissa for years, he has chosen to go down this road. I am not in any way trying to defend him for what I also consider bad behavior. So, remember when I started off by addressing iDubbbz's response video and calling out his arguments? Yeah, well, I don't think he meant any of it. I think he'd maintained some of the more joking things he said, but otherwise I don't think Ian Carter would stand behind the arguments iDubbbz made in that response video. Full disclosure, what I'm about to say is a theory, so take it with a grain of salt. You see, I've never felt a strong bond with iDubbbz, so when this controversy struck, I was not disappointed or outraged, but confused. Honestly, I thought iDubbbz was better than this, and I made this video because I still think iDubbbz, as a character at least, is above letting his public figure girlfriend sell herself on the internet. You might need to sit down for this one, but I think iDubbbz is a smart guy. I think he is capable of sound reasoning and moral integrity. His videos are absurd and crude and never take themselves seriously, so you might be tempted to say that he's an idiot, but that's a totally disingenuous take on him as a YouTuber. Look at this guy's work ethic. He prioritizes quality over quantity, lets his imagination drive his video concepts rather than trend surfing, and overall, his character is unique, if not genuinely original. iDubbbz is not stupid. His videos are absurd, but that is in no way an indication of his character, like his caliber as a person, not his online persona. His Content Cop series reinforced the idea in my head that this guy was capable of compelling, interesting thought and behavior. In his videos, especially the Content Cops, Ian deconstructs and systematically destroys the people he's covering. He breaks down issues and explains why something is problematic or worthy of contempt. He does so using logic. His arguments would not be so engaging and convincing if they were not supported by the most basic standards of logic. iDubbbz's content led me to believe that he was a reasonable and driven individual, which is why when I learned that his girlfriend was a grade A bottom feeder, thank you to Brittany Venti for picking up on Ian's slack on that Content Cop, I was confused. And then when I found out Anissa was starting an OnlyFans account and iDubbbz was allegedly cool with it,
but I'm cool with it,
I was even more confused. Now I've seen enough to convince me that Ian is not in fact cool with it and is just saving face. One of the many dramas in which Anissa was involved had to do with her potentially joining Zoe Berger's Twitch stream team, often affectionately referred to as a Thought Squad.
Didn't you want to join Zoe's Ho Squad? No, I never wanted to. I never wanted to join Zoe's Ho Squad.
She denied any involvement with Zoe and co, and then this happened.
Basically, she sucked up to Celestia Vega.
Also false.
Begging to be a part of Zoe's Ho Squad, but iDubbbz told her not to, so she
That's
teamed.
true.
Riddle me this. How does it make any sense that iDubbbz would have a problem with his girlfriend joining a Twitch Thought Squad, who are no strangers to acting slutty on public streams, but then be okay with Anissa starting a lewd OnlyFans account? It defies reason. OnlyFans is orders of skankitude above being a Twitch thought, but Ian is okay with it as opposed to her doing the exact same content she was always doing, but alongside other titty streamers? Maybe he was waiting for her boob job before he started pimping her. That's a possibility. I don't think it's a stretch to say that the guy who makes content as logically coherent as iDubbbz has some integrity. Enough integrity not to stoop to the level of allowing his partner to unnecessarily whore herself out online. He appears to have enough class to keep Anissa away from Zoe Berger's Thought Squad. But logically coherent content? That doesn't sound like iDubbbz. Wrong. iDubbbz's channel is full of examples of him logically dismantling other people's bullshit and forming compelling criticism in response. I'm convinced that if iDubbbz had a topic he was passionate about, cleaned up his presentation and avoided insults, he would make a great debater.
There are a lot of reasons to call Keemstar a hypocrite. I'm going to focus on one reason, the reason that I find most compelling. He has this really immature technique for insulting people. He will insult them while simultaneously putting himself up on a pedestal.
I really don't care, but I kind of really want him to make one on me.
These are quite obviously conflicting statements because you have no idea what strategy to actually go with. I believe that that meme was born from her channel because her life is fucking crazy. She gets kidnapped, she gets banged, and she fights people. Her life is fucking bananas. Nah, I'm just kidding, it's not bananas. It's actually very mundane. If you boil down any of her videos, you realize, holy shit, I've gotten in arguments before. Someone has lied about me before. I've had a horrible experience with customer service representatives as well. No one logs on to the Fine Network to see Rafi and Benny fucked eyes do reactions. What you guys need to understand is that they cannot function without a format, because they are the corpses of YouTube. What are they going to do for their videos if they don't have other people coming in to film? They're going to do it themselves? Fuck no. Every one of these entrepreneur moguls does this shit. It's not happening unless I'm recording it. It is not happening unless I'm recording it. I am here. I am here. I am surrounded by wealth. There's this one guy, Joey Diabetes Tour, who really needs the camera, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 feet away from his face while he's eating. Yo, what's going on, everybody? Receding hairline here. I'm sure you guys went and saw the Leafy response video already, where he systematically dismantled each and every one of my arguments.
Now, most people don't like these things for two reasons. One, they're embarrassing.
Yeah, no shit, they're embarrassing. They're kind of meant to be embarrassing because it's like, yeah, if you're doing a shameful activity, you know, drunk driving is embarrassing, so seems like a fitting punishment, right? Him being an asshole cannot be justified by his large following. The world doesn't owe you shit, no matter how fucking large your sub count is. By having a video where the main premise is poop going in a mouth and being smeared on a face, you are actually closer to the most depraved porn in the world than you are to actual kid entertainment like unboxing fucking surprise eggs. Keemstar is very adamant that the Drama Alert channel is different from his Twitter account. They shouldn't be compared to one another because one is very opinionated and the other one is facts, news, and hard-hitting reporting. However, one is run by a complete sociopath and the other is also run by the same complete sociopath.
Ian is capable of sound reasoning and highly entertaining argumentation. iDubbbz is no idiot, so it was baffling to see how logically inept his response video was. The whole purpose of my arguing against his points in the response video was to demonstrate how far he fell seemingly overnight. For this video, I went back and watched iDubbbz's most recent videos as well as all the content cops, and it is all up to par with regards to logic and consistency, which is why it's so disconcerting to see how badly his response video shit the bed. He was right when he said that he's not your dad. That was a good point, but it was his only good point. When did iDubbbz become the guy who makes one good argument per video? And yeah, you could say that he's obviously joking and doesn't mean any of it sincerely, but he's clearly doing the same character in his response video as he was in every other video of his. His act is consistent. His argumentation is not.
I had two options that night. I could have walked away and looked like a bitch, or I could have did something about it, and I did something about it. I grabbed her phone and I smashed it. I was like, enough is enough, you little stupid bitch. I smashed her phone.
Only two options. That's it. That's all he has. There isn't a third option that got swept under the rug, and that's to play along with it. There isn't even an infinite number of options that allow you to do any number of things that don't make you look like an asshole or a pussy. What am I gonna do? Do you think I should just, take a shotgun to her head? No, bitch. It's time to die now. No, iDubbbz, you should break up with her. Only two options. That's it. That's all he has. There isn't a third option that got swept under the rug.
This leads me to believe that he doesn't actually stand behind the arguments he made in the response video. The way he argues there is not consistent with how he argues in general, and his public opinion on sex work is not consistent with his private opinion on Anissa joining a thought squad. The only other reference I have to back up the claim that iDubbbz has some semblance of integrity is this.
I've watched basically everything Ian's put out in the past few years, and it's been really interesting to see behind the scenes. One of the biggest misconceptions I had was that he'll say anything, but it couldn't be farther from the truth. He really does have strong principles, and it's not the whole kind of I don't give a fuck attitude that I think a lot of people assume.
Yes, he could be lying because he was collaborating with iDubbbz, so it's all just a circle jerk, etc. Look, everything I've said could be wrong. I am making some pretty bold claims based on scant evidence. I get that, but I feel that this controversy is worth exploring from a different angle. Because if iDubbbz is actually not comfortable with Anissa's choice, and did make the response video purely to keep up appearances, and he's now being lambasted all over the internet, then he's living a nightmare with no escape. Personally, I don't wish that on the guy. I've really enjoyed his content over the years, and I don't want to see him go down in flames because he made the mistake of dating one of the most repugnant people ever to get unanimously labeled a snake on the entire platform. Seriously. Just type Anissa Joma, or iDubbbz's girlfriend, in the YouTube search bar and you will find far more videos exposing her for being a thief, liar, and snake than anything else. The evidence of this woman's misconduct is so extensive because misconduct is her character. After watching a couple videos criticizing her, it's hard to come away from them thinking that she is anything but a naturally bad person. And that is iDubbbz's girlfriend. My theory is that Ian and Anissa have a toxic relationship. Maybe it turned toxic recently, maybe it's always been that way. Imagine a Gone Girl situation. But Lumo, Gone Girl is just a movie. Yeah, it's a movie with a very authentic portrayal of a toxic relationship. Without spoiling anything, you can see that the characters in that movie have a strong attachment to each other, despite having good reason to want to murder each other. A toxic relationship does not need to be anything more complex or dramatic than simple conflicting feelings and emotional strife. Gone Girl adds a lot of flavor on top of that, but at the core of the relationship is their deep-seated hatred of each other coming into conflict with what little love they have left for each other. I think Ian is so engrossed in his character and relationship that he is denying any suffering he experiences. Because iDubbbz is not fazed by human emotions. iDubbbz is a stone-cold, ridiculous and meticulous character who doesn't let anything get under his skin. He takes scrutiny and insults in his stride and delivers comedic criticism at the same time. iDubbbz is not untouchable because of his massive following of loyal fans. We believe iDubbbz is untouchable because that is how he behaves on screen. He gives off the vibe of an inhumanly undaunted individual, and that is a fundamental part of his persona. So, after Anissa's OnlyFans controversy, Ian had an ultimatum: compromise his character and relationship to reveal that he's not comfortable with Anissa's choice, thereby remaining consistent with his telling her not to join Zoe Berger's Thought Squad, or compromise his logical and moral integrity by claiming that he supports sex workers and alienating his fanbase, but remaining consistent with the vulgar edgelord side of his persona. I can't imagine that that would be an easy choice to make, especially with so many eyes on him. My theory is that iDubbbz is suffering from an emotionally crippling relationship but is so absorbed in it that he can't see how it's affecting his thinking and content. I think iDubbbz chose to sacrifice his principles in order to placate Anissa and remain in character, but what he either missed or deliberately neglected was that to maintain his unfazed, edgy persona, he would have to forfeit his logical integrity. I think that iDubbbz is a victim, not only of Anissa's ethically bankrupt lifestyle, but also of a perverse, broken culture that tolerates and celebrates degeneracy as though it were free expression of the human spirit instead of what it actually is: indecent, unhealthy, regressive behavior. And to close this out, I'd like to repeat that I don't have any strong attachment to iDubbbz. I love his content. I mean, I'd be lying if I said he didn't inspire me in some ways, but I don't know the guy. I wish him well, but no more or less than any other YouTuber whose content I value. And I certainly don't wish emotional torment on the guy because I don't think anyone deserves to go through what I speculate he's going through. What attracted me most to making this video was that iDubbbz was being attacked from all sides. People calling him a simp or a cuck, people calling him a pimp, people criticizing him for even having a girlfriend, Anissa, who I can't imagine is easy to live with. Everyone was finding an angle to attack iDubbbz, and I thought, well, what if he's not actually altogether up there and is in pain but wants to keep up the act for his viewers? But don't get me wrong, I'm not saying he's innocent. Toxic relationships take two to tango, and I think he's capable of dishing out abuse in his own right. And I seriously believe that his response video is the worst video on his channel purely because of how bad his arguments are in there. That's enough to warrant opposition from me. But then there's always the possibility that I'm wrong, and Ian is genuinely comfortable with Anissa having an OnlyFans account and does stand behind the arguments in his response video, which I would find disheartening. I think iDubbbz is better than that. But if not, I think I'll survive. Before I finish up, I'd like to give a shout out to Brittany Venti, who has covered sex work and the effect of OnlyFans extensively. Her channel was an invaluable resource in my research, so if you liked this video, you should go check her out. As always, I love discussion and debate, so if you have any criticism of anything I said throughout this bloated hot take, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, see you next time. Those people are victims of circumstance, and I do not apply the same standards of scrutiny to them as I do... Shut up.